They're very gifted orators. All right,
yes,
we'll have special coverage tonight here on NewsNation. Don't forget to join me, Chris Cuomo. We'll have all the best analysis with Chris Starwell, Geraldo Rivera, Connell McShane. But right now it's time for The Hill, hosted by Blake Berman.
And here on The Hill tonight, will he be Minnesota nice? Tim Walz just hours away from his big moment. Or will he follow in the footsteps of the Obamas?
I want to know who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs.
All right, in moments, I will explain the not so subtle shift, plus a first for Donald Trump. Now he is behind bulletproof glass. How he was and wasn't kept confined earlier today. Also tonight is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about to drop out of the presidential race. What we know about his upcoming address to the country. And do you think that this right here works?
To officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. 5, get out, another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what?
Maybe it does. I don't know. It's the DNC moment that has gone viral. Hello from Washington and welcome to the most politically unpredictable show in all of television. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, 76 days until Election Day and a live look right now at the Democratic National Convention, Chicago, Illinois, roughly 5 hours or so until the Democratic Party tries to introduce its vice presidential nominee, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. The former teacher turned politician served 6 terms in Washington as a member of Congress. Then he left for the governor's mansion. Now, despite roughly 17 years in national politics, Walz was not a household political name, but seemed to catch attention during the shotgun vice presidential auditions. Seen here saying this about Donald Trump just days after Joe Biden exited the race.
And how often in the world do you make that wake up afterwards and know that a black woman kicked his and sent him on the road?
Now, if that doesn't sound like Al Gore or even Joe Biden, is it? Welcome to the new approach of the Democratic Party. Last night's convention featured the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, who once famously said, and I quote, "When they go low, we go high." Well, now it seems like a game of political limbo.
His same old con, doubling down on ugly, misogynistic, racist lies as a substitute for real ideas and solutions that will actually make people's lives better.
Now, the reality here is they are not alone. We could spend the whole hour, this entire show, on examples of Donald Trump. You have seen it, though, for the past decade, and maybe that's why the Democrats are starting to fight back. For example, The Atlantic, even noting today, quote, "The Democrats aren't on the high road anymore." Now, the presidential race is the Super Bowl of politics. Nancy Pelosi, who will speak tonight, by the way, the one who orchestrated the pressure campaign to oust President Biden from the race, seemingly tipped her hand earlier this year. Watch.
Just win, baby. We got to win this election.
That, she said, was her New Year's resolution. Just win, baby. That is the famous quote of Al Davis, the legendary former owner of the Oakland Raiders, the team that used to play in the home state of Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris. Throughout the hour here on The Hill, we'll be joined by the Democratic Congressman Seth Magaziner, Seth Moulton as well, alongside with the Republican Senator Ron Johnson. But first with us throughout the hour, Michael Starr Hopkins, Democratic strategist, Ashley Davis, former official in the George W. Bush White House, Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist, and Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor, Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Whoa, what happened to "when they go low, we go high"? She took a sledgehammer to that?
Yeah.
Threw it right out the United Center there and into the trash bin. You good with that?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because
it's a total change.
Because you got to sometimes fight fire with fire. And what I think Democrats have learned over the years is that when you go low, they will kick you where in the low, so you got to fight back here. You can't just sit there.
I remember just weeks ago where dear sweet Kurt Bardella was on here,
very sweet,
lambasting every Republican about how you're never going to win if you're calling Kamala names.
Yes, that's true.
And now the Democrats are doing it. You got to be able to do it. Let's just be honest here. It's a hypocritical stance for Democrats to now take. Oh, I know.
Hypocritical?
That is completely hypocritical.
There's a very big difference.
There's
let me finish. Let me finish. I know this might trigger you, but let me finish. I'm just kidding. There's a very big difference in saying Kamala Harris is dumb, crazy, garbage, etc., and contrast that with saying, hey, the job that Donald Trump might be trying to get, someone might want to tell him it's a
That wasn't the insult, and you know it. Oh, that's a beautiful editorial revision.
So there were different words than that. And here was the Atlantic today. Quote, the Obamas showed that they, too, are ready to get their hands dirty, but also that they haven't given up on a rosier vision of what things can be. You're good with this?
Absolutely. So there's a thing in black culture called reading receipts. And what Michelle Obama did last night. Okay, is that Housewives?
Oh, we love reading receipts.
Okay, so reading receipts, Michelle Obama read the receipts. She talked about what a threat Trump was and talked about it in a way that regular people talk. When we go to barbershops, when we go to restaurants, we go to sports games.
So was she wrong when she ran the whole when they go low, we go high?
No, we tried it and it didn't work. So now we have to punch back.
Donald,
being hypocritical.
So Donald Trump.
It's called learning.
It's called being adaptive.
Here's what Donald Trump said about all of. I'm going to get your reactions. Donald Trump earlier today, out on the campaign trail, North Carolina, said this.
Did you see Barack Hussein Obama last night? Take little shots. He was taking shots at your president. And so was Michelle. You know, they always say, sure, please stick to policy. Don't get personal. And yet they're getting personal all night long, these people. Do I still have to stick to policy?
What do you tell him? Does he stick to policy or does he play the game?
What's different with her, and you both said, because she's a woman and she's a black woman. And so there's a little bit different of standard. But, you know, it is disgusting how the media is okay with the Democrats going out, you know, them being okay with going after Trump. And themselves going after, not you, of course. I mean, obviously.
As you see here, we poke both sides.
But when he does it, people go crazy.
Yeah, but when he does it, he literally talks about, like, women being ugly and stupid. He talks like there's a difference between her.
She's calling him con man, stuff like that.
He is a con man. No, he is the courts have literally said that he's a con man.
Guys, I'm really sorry that this is triggering, but like take a deep breath and just acknowledge that you are on the other side of the position. And it's not because of some self-gross, altruistic narrative that Democrats are trying to set.
There's this idea that we're going to
kill This is how politics works. Yes. And you guys are in the fight now. And it's not because you guys ever had the higher ground. It's just because you said it didn't make it true.
For the record, I've never claimed the higher ground. I've always said Democrats should fight like this.
Joining me now, the Democratic Congressman Seth Magaziner. He is from the state of Rhode Island, watching all the festivities like us from just outside Chicago. There he is, home in Rhode Island. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Michelle Obama then, Michelle Obama now. Let me get your reaction on the other side.
Well, Michelle Obama is always.
Hold on one second. I want to hold on. I'm going to play some sound for you. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
When someone is cruel or acts like a bully, you don't stoop to their level. No, our motto is when they go low, we go high. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No.
Which version, Congressman, do you like better?
Well, Michelle Obama has always been a rock star in the past, the present, and will continue to be in the future. She's a truth teller, and that's what she's always been. So I reject this notion that, you know, the Obamas have somehow changed over the years. I mean, they have always been great leaders and great communicators. I think what has changed is that Donald Trump has become increasingly desperate and unhinged. He is flailing.
What's the way forward, right? Because I wonder what the way forward for your party is, sir, because there was a clear shift, right? Yeah. It's gone from when they go low, we go high, to now this. And do you believe now is the right time to do that?
Listen, I was at the convention last night, and all through the night there was joy and optimism, a feeling of celebration. And being forward-looking. Like the contrast between the Democratic convention, which has been forward-looking, unified, optimistic, and the Republican convention a few weeks ago, which was doom and gloom and Donald Trump rehashing his grievances, was a clear contrast. And I am very excited about where we are as a party and where we're headed as a country.
All right, so let me ask you about where we are headed as a country. So the big story today, or one of them, the jobs numbers that got revised down over the past year's worth of data, some 818,000 jobs that the government said came about. We learned today that wasn't the case. 30% fewer than what we had been told as a country. Congressman, if the jobs market is weakening, why is it weakening now?
Well, first of all, under President Biden and Vice President Harris, we've added, 13, 14 million jobs. Unemployment still near historic lows, 4% unemployment. We're getting serious about price gouging as a country and starting to having some success in lowering costs for consumers. In contrast with 4 years of chaos under Donald Trump. So listen, I think that
there was COVID there was COVID, obviously, right? And that skews every number on both sides. You're right, historic unemployment at near lows, but you can't deny that the unemployment rate is now ticking up and the jobs market is not as strong as it is. And I wonder why you think it's happening now.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we all know that the Federal Reserve has been late in bringing down interest rates. I think that today's data confirms that they should have started this sooner. And I expect that when they come back in the fall, the Federal Reserve, they will relieve some pressure on rates and inject some growth into the economy. But again, unemployment is still near historic lows. We're still at 4% and change, which is a good, solid number. And doing it without raising broad-based taxes, without throwing up barriers to commerce. I mean, doing it the right way and in a sustainable way by investing in people.
What's happening in your state? Let me leave you with this, because I wonder what's happening in your state, because your state's up to 4.5%.
Again, we are near historic lows in unemployment in Rhode Island and across the country under the Biden-Harris administration. And, we've seen in Donald Trump's Project 2025 agenda, which is more tax giveaways to the people at the very top, his buddies from Mar-a-Lago who don't need it, in contrast with Kamala Harris's agenda of taking on price gouging by the big corporations, expanding the child tax credit.
You think that's a solid plan? I mean, the Washington Post called the quote-unquote price gouging a gimmick. The Washington Post editorial board, those are their words. The Target CEO basically.
When I talk to voters, they see what's happening at the grocery store. They know that profit margins at the big ag companies and at the grocery store chains have gone up, not down over time. And so it is not a joke or a gimmick, price gouging to consumers who are hurting. But what is a joke, a gimmick, is this Project 2025 plan to give even more tax cuts away to the people at the very top, as opposed to Kamala Harris's plan to provide tax relief to the middle class and those.
I mean, if you want to go down like Project 2025, I could play the game. I could cite Bernie Sanders on the other side, on the left side or the right side, and his policies.
Yeah, but Kamala Harris has released an economic plan that includes expanding the earned income tax credit, which rewards people for working, expands the child tax credit to help families raise their kids, as opposed to Donald Trump doing what he already did the first time he had an opportunity, which was to put 90+% of his tax cuts into the pockets of the very wealthy and the big corporations who didn't need it. That's not what the American people want. That's not what voters want. They want an economic plan like Kamala Harris's that is focused on growing the middle class, not more trickle-down, top-down, Trump-style economics.
Congressman Seth Magaziner, Democrat from Rhode Island, first time on the show, I believe. Thanks for joining us here on the Hill.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, you got it. And to be clear, Kamala Harris has said that she wants to pay for that plan by raising corporate taxes from 21 to 28%. The Democrats will tell you that's a great idea. Republicans will slam it. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says if you do that, for every 1%, you raise revenues by $100 billion, give or take, each year. But the nonpartisan office also says eventually that comes back to hurt workers. Just some of the conversation and the details on both sides of the aisle. Still to come here from the Hill over the next 45 minutes or so, the Secret Service's bulletproof plan. We'll show you the changes put in place today for Donald Trump and his first outdoor rally since the assassination attempt. On the other side of the break, a big tease from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Did you hear about this today? Is he dropping out of the race? That would be huge news. I'll show you how that could shake up the presidential race. Chris Stirewalt breaking down new numbers as well. What do we know about Tim Walz and J.D. Vance? Hello, Chris, other side of the break. And imagine this moment. You know that he wants to be president one day. We all do. So what do you think it was last night? What do you think it was like for Gavin Newsom as he had to stand there at the United Center and talk about Kamala Harris potentially being the next president? Hello from Washington with our eyes on the DNC. Back in 4 minutes here on The Hill. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign today announced that he will address the nation on Friday, leading to the question of what he might do going forward and if he could be dropping out of the race. But the campaign says he will be talking about the quote-unquote path forward. Now, it comes as his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, has been teasing the possibility of an endorsement of Donald Trump.
There's two options that we're looking at, and one is staying in, forming that new party, but we run the risk of a Kamala Harris and Waltz presidency, or we walk away right now and join forces with Donald Trump.
All right, so we've been talking for months here. What would happen if RFK Jr. eventually did that, and where might his support go? Let me show you real quick sort of the two different races, right? We had the Trump-Biden race, and at that point, Trump was up, call it 4. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was at 9% at that point in time in mid to late July. Now here we are basically a month later, and you can see the shift. Harris up 4. This is according to DDHQ, the polling average. And RFK Jr.'s numbers have gone down to 3, from 9 to 3. We have a sense that some of his support is going to Kamala Harris, and here's how. In a Pew Research poll, and this asked voters who supported him in July who they support now. Look at this. Kamala Harris, 39%. RFK Jr., 39%. Donald Trump, 20%. So you see there, RFK Jr.'s, it's voters. It's essentially 40% of them now say they support her, which begs the question, how does he have a path forward? Yesterday, I spoke with Michael Whatley, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, asked him this.
I will say I'm not privy to those discussions that the campaign may be having, but I certainly think we would welcome Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his supporters across the transom, and we certainly agree with him that the biggest threat to this country right now is a Kamala Harris-Tim Walz presidency.
The question was, do you think this will end in an endorsement of Donald Trump? You heard his response there. We'll see what happens later this week. Meantime, in just a few hours, Governor Tim Walz will cap day 3 of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. It will be the governor's largest audience yet to try to introduce himself. So how do Americans feel about the pick? And how does he compare to his Republican counterpart, J.D. Vance? Chris Stirewalt is here to break it all down. Hello, Chris.
Hello, my friend. You're looking mighty fine up there at the big wall.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so what do people think about Governor Tim Walz? Well, the most common thing to feel about Tim Walz is nothing. 37%. Now, this is a good poll. I like this poll. This is the Associated Press National Opinion Research Center poll, especially on issues and attributes. Mwah, we love this poll. This is great. Most Americans, the plurality of voters don't know enough about him to have an opinion. Okay, how does that compare to, you know who, J.D. Vance? What's going on? His partner, his opponent is a little better known. He's 9 points better known, and not to the good. You see 44% unfavorable points of view. But why? Why? Is it just because Democrats don't like him, or what's going on? Let's break that down. Let us break down the breakdown. Here's the favorable views of the candidates among independents. And among independents, these are the ones that are indexed for who's really going to win this election. That's where 55% of them don't know who Tim Walz, don't know enough about Tim Walz to have an opinion, because they're independents, because they're not into what the parties are doing, and they didn't track all of this drama, because that's the Democrats' problem. Okay, how does that compare to J.D. Vance? Pretty good. 50% also don't know. Here's the problem for J.D. Vance. Again, these are the independent voters. These are the people that decide the elections. 31% unfavorable compared to 17. So it was a rocky rollout. And we've seen this before, but let's talk about it again. How does J.D. Vance compare to the rest of candidates of the past? And bad. It's not good. He's the least liked of any recent vice presidential pick. Tim Walz is in good country up there with Mike Pence and Joe Biden that were basically well liked. And let's look at what's happened to Vance since July. And this is when he was rolled out. So in July, and these are two different polls, but they're both excellent polls. This is New York Times Siena and the AP NORC. And in July, 36, 27, 36, 39, 24. Now it's 27, 44, 28. You see the movement, and it's not in Vance's favor. Now, he can still do a heck of a good job out there being an attack dog. But here's what Tim Walz is hoping to do tonight, I suspect, is take the baton from Bill Clinton for a new, less cringy, less problematic outreach to what we used to call, back when ships were made of wood and men were made of iron, we used to call bubbas. Bill Clinton was good at reaching out to bubbas, and Tim Walz's job is to get the nuevo bubbas, whatever the new bubbas, whatever we want to call them now, to get those voters, and that's who he's going to be reaching out to tonight.
Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. We'll catch you tonight on special coverage. Thank you, brother.
See you soon.
You got it. All right, still to come here on The Hill. Who would you trust taking that 3 a.m. phone call if there happens to be a crisis around the globe? The next leader, after all, they're going to be the commander-in-chief. Coming up here on The Hill, we are speaking with one powerful member on the Armed Services Committee as China revs up its nuclear program. Plus, the Obamas make their case against Donald Trump. How he's responding, and can it move the needle? He's losing ground in Wisconsin, and we are there live. Next. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Questions in North Carolina tonight as two men were detained earlier today at Donald Trump's rally in that state. Police reportedly found weapons in at least one vehicle. It comes as the former president took the stage behind bulletproof glass at his first outdoor campaign event since the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. NewsNation national correspondent Robert Sherman joins us live in Asheboro, North Carolina with the very latest. Surreal scene there. Robert, and what do we know about these arrests?
Yeah, Blake, it was about an hour after the former president's remarks wrapped in which we looked out at the parking lot over here and saw this law enforcement presence surrounding one car. And then the next thing you knew, we saw weapons being pulled out of that vehicle, being placed on the hood and the trunk. At least one formal arrest was made here in terms of why there were weapons in that car or if there was any ulterior motive or nefarious purpose behind that. We don't know that at this point. But it comes on a day in which security is certainly front and center. The first time that we saw the former president giving an outdoor rally like this since Butler, Pennsylvania, and the first time that we saw this ballistic glass surrounding the podium. We knew the Secret Service was looking for ways to bolster protection, but that was the first time we've seen this on the campaign trail. Of course, the former president didn't necessarily stay locked behind the glass, as there was actually a moment during the rally which one of the attendees was struggling with the heat, and the former president came down into the crowd, gave that person a hug, so he wasn't behind the glass the entire time. But in terms of what people thought about all of this and the new move, here's what they had to say. Take a listen.
I think it's a shame, but I think it needed to happen. We need to keep him safe.
I think it was smart. I think that they need to do that at every rally, just because of what happened.
So in terms of how much of this we'll see regarding the ballistic glass or how many of these events will be outside compared to inside, that remains unclear. What we do know is the former president is back on the road, heading to Arizona tomorrow, where he's set to focus on the border. Blake?
Robert Sherman live for us in North Carolina this evening. Robert, thank you. From that swing state or battleground state to another, up to Wisconsin now. Joining us live here on the Hill, the Republican Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, thanks for being back with us. I wonder just first, sir, your initial thoughts of seeing Donald Trump today behind bulletproof glass.
Well, Blake, I agree with that one woman. It's necessary. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate it's come to this point in our history where presidents need to be behind bulletproof glass. I mean, I wouldn't want to be behind it, but again, it's necessary.
All right, let me talk to you about what's going on in your state, Wisconsin. New York Times poll has Kamala Harris up 4. Cook poll has her up 3. Even Rasmussen, which is Republican-leaning, has her up 1 in your state. It is a tall task for Republicans to win there. It's only happened once in the last 9 tries, Trump in 16. But why do you think he's losing right now in your home state?
I'm not sure that's true. I've run some close elections. I think in 2016, I was down 11 points. At this point in time, I won by over 3%. Last election, 2022, I was down 7 points at this point in time, and I won in an error race by about 1%. So, there's only one poll that counts. I think when Americans actually start hearing the truth about what Vice President Harris is proposing, getting rid of stepped-up basis, taxing unrealized capital gains, increasing the corporate tax, which will just be taken out of worker wages. When they realize that she will not only support the failed policies of this administration, but double down on them. So, when people start finding out the truth about Vice President nominee Walz, they should be repulsed by it, and hopefully they'll vote for Trump.
So here's what she said. Here's what she said in your home state last night. She was in Milwaukee. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
We believe in a future where we lower the cost of living for America's families. And when I am president, I will bring down the cost of groceries by making sure markets are competitive and fair.
That is a populist message, and I wonder how you counteract that. Because I know you say you've run close races, and I take you at your word, obviously. But Donald Trump in that state is struggling, and I wonder how he turns it around if that's going to be the message there.
Well, you counter by telling the truth. First of all, she supported the massive deficit spending, which sparked 40-year high inflation. Your dollar's now only worth 83 cents. She caused that, and she's proposing another $2 trillion of additional deficit spending. She wants to increase people's taxes, so she can say she's going to bring down the cost of food. She's caused the cost of food to skyrocket, and price controls.
Is it her, though? I mean, you can't really pin it on her, per se, can you?
Well, she's part of the administration. She supported it. She actually was the tie-breaking vote in some of these massive deficit spending pieces of legislation that sparked 40-year high inflation. So, yeah, I think she's absolutely responsible for it.
Let me ask you about Donald Trump real quick. He said this today in response to the Obamas last night.
They always say, sure, please stick to policy, don't get personal. And yet they're getting personal all night long, these people. Do I still have to stick to policy?
Could you answer that question for us, Senator? Would you advise him to stick to policy or no?
Well, we should stick to the issues, but we also have to be honest with the fact that his Democrats have been lying through their teeth for years. Remember, the whole Russian collusion hoax, that was a dirty trick by the Hillary Clinton campaign the corrupt FBI and Department of Justice ran with, as well as the corrupt media that continued to amplify that message, too.
Democrats will say Donald Trump's not the model of honesty, and Americans, the polling shows that.
Well, again, the polling is highly influenced by the corporate media, the legacy media, who doesn't tell the truth.
All right, Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin. Again, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Always appreciate your time, sir.
Have a good night.
You got it. Are you worried about Wisconsin? It's seemingly flipped. And what would you say to that? How would you answer that Trump question?
Again, well, I keep saying, and I'm going to continue to say it, let's just see what happens mid-September. Let's see what happens in October. This is like her, exciting time right now. But I 100% agree, and I can't stand that she keeps talking about these groceries, because she and President Biden have caused for the last 3.5 years. And I agree with Senator Johnson, the reason that the prices are so high. And so now that she wants to do price controls, why didn't she do it 3 years ago if it's the greatest thing in the world?
I got to fundamentally reject this idea that inflation we can blame the inflation issue on Vice President Harris. They've lowered inflation by 60% in the last 2 years. We got inflation because Donald Trump exploded the deficit.
Hold on. So when Joe Biden entered office, inflation was at 1.4%. 17 months later, it topped out at 9, and it has since come down.
Absolutely.
There was COVID, there was money printing, there was rescuing on both sides of the aisle.
For sure.
The reality is the administration, just like Republicans have done for years, spent nonstop.
Exactly. But what Ron Johnson said in that interview was very telling. He said corporations will take out tax raises on consumers and workers. Corporations have made more money in the last 4 years than they ever have in the history of our country. CEOs pay 1,300% higher than their average workers. Corporations taking out tax cut raises on their workers is the problem.
It is price
So
control.
do you want us,
It's a problem.
do you want us to be competitive with China or not?
Yeah.
Elon Musk is making hundreds of billions of dollars. Workers' pay hasn't risen in like 50
Yeah, but Elon Musk isn't going to solve the tax
Here's my
code, like going after him.
No, but CEO pay, corporate pay is the problem.
I hear you on all that, but here's my question. Haven't Democrats had control of the White House, 12 of the last 16 years? 4 of those were held by a Republican, 4 of those. So when are Democrats going to stand up and say, we've had the leadership opportunity in this country, and look at all of our failures? At what point, how much more time do Democrats think they need in the Oval Office before they start getting it right for the American people?
Good faith negotiation partner.
Oh, booer.
John President,
Let me give Kurt the last word here.
He's got a bully pulpit.
Hold on, let me give Kurt the last word.
The one thing that always stands out to me is Republicans want to blame every problem in America on Kamala Harris, and Ron Johnson talked about she cast the deciding vote, right?
Well, she did.
She did.
No, I'm not
facts are facts.
Let me finish. I'm not disputing
He said it too.
I'm not disputing that. But I find it interesting that there are so many Republicans nationwide who, when they are in their districts, are taking credit for that policy, for those bills, for that
Not the inflation
for that,
reduction.
yes, for that spending, and yet they voted against it, but they like to take credit for it. I'm just
You're wrong. Yeah, I've seen people do it about the infrastructure bill, but not on the inflation.
You're way in the weeds, but I do understand your point, but
I'm just making the point.
All right, still to come
I think
here
it's a good
on the
point.
Hill. A new worry involving, by the way, China and nuclear weapons. We know very little about how a Commander-in-Chief Harris views the world. Congressman Seth Moulton, a veteran and member of the Armed Services Committee, on the other side of the break, live from Chicago. Stay with us.
NewsNation tonight on Balance kicks off special live coverage from the DNC. It's Governor Walz's big night, but can he overcome questions about his record? Geraldo Rivera weighs in. Then former Congressman Tim Ryan on whether Democrats are doing enough to reach all America on Balance tonight. And then another big night in Chicago at the DNC. Clinton, Walz. Trust NewsNation to cover every angle with respect for all Americans. The Democratic National Convention tonight, 7/6 Central on NewsNation.
For Vice President Kamala Harris will speak tomorrow night. Tim Walz, her running mate, speaking in about 4 hours' time. Now, since becoming the official Democratic nominee for president, the vice president has yet to come out with any sort of foreign policy positions. The only thing we've heard from presidential candidate Harris is on Israel, after she met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a couple weeks ago. The former President Donald Trump has given a dire warning, in his view, if his opponent were to win. But at least with Trump, you have 4 years of history. You know what he did, what he said, the decisions he made. For Harris, we still don't really have an idea. Joining us now is a Democratic congressman from the state of Massachusetts, Congressman Seth Moulton, a veteran as well, as I always mention. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. I think it's a reasonable, nice to talk to you again. It's a reasonable question to ask, right? We've heard her outline we've heard her outline the economic policy, but we haven't on foreign policy. And I wonder if you know what her vision is, because we haven't heard anything.
No, I mean, look, the simple answer is we don't know exactly what her vision is, but I think we have some broad strokes, some things that are very clearly consistent from the Biden-Harris administration, and some contrasts with Donald Trump. One thing that's very clear is the Biden administration understands and agrees with the national security strategy of the United States, which states very clearly that China is the #1 threat facing the United States of America. And she's not going to try to divert attention from that, say getting dragged into a war in the Middle East. Now, what we need to do in the Pacific with China is deter and prevent a conflict that could literally turn into World War III. The #1 way you do that is saying you're going to defend Taiwan. Donald Trump has already come out and done the single worst thing you can possibly do for deterrence, which is say the United States will not defend Taiwan. So there's an example where we don't have all the details yet from the Harris administration, but we have an idea.
Okay, let me hit the pause button on China. You're on the select committee. I'm going to get there in a second. When should she unveil it? Should she unveil it next week? Obviously, it's not coming tomorrow night. When should she unveil her thinking, her views, the way she looks at the world?
I hope she does it soon because I think that foreign policy should be an incredibly important issue in this election. Now, I'm a veteran. I serve on these national security committees. You can say I'm a bit biased here, but it's an incredibly dangerous time in the world. And so we need to understand what her vision is. And I do think there will be some significant contrasts with Donald Trump. So I hope she releases it soon.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you about China. As I mentioned, you're on the select committee. New York Times report, the president approved secret nuclear strategy refocusing on China threat. Here's what they report. The shift comes as the Pentagon believes China's stockpiles will rival the size and diversity of the United States' and Russia's over the next decade. What can you tell us, Congressman? What worries you about that? When you saw that report, what was your initial instinct response?
Well, I mean, I understand this very well because of the clearances I have, the classified intelligence that we get sitting on the Armed Services Committee. I actually sit on the Strategic Forces Subcommittee that deals specifically with this issue. And there are two major concerns. One, as the report outlines, China has an enormous number of nuclear weapons that they are acquiring at a rapid rate, a rate faster than we anticipated. But number two, it's not clear how they intend to use them. And there are some real concerns that the safeguards that we have developed with the Soviet Union and now Russia over decades of this nuclear balance of power that have kept us from actually having a nuclear exchange don't exist with China. So this is incredibly important that the administration is focused on this issue.
So let me ask you this. If she were to call you up, hypothetically, and she says, Congressman, what do I do here? What would you tell her?
What I would tell her is that, Madam Vice President, you need to totally rethink our nuclear strategy because it's just a very different problem dealing with one major nuclear adversary in Russia versus dealing with two.
Congressman Seth Moulton, Democrat from Massachusetts.
Is doing.
Got it. Congressman, thanks for being with us, joining us from our studios in Chicago, just down the road from the DNC. Appreciate you coming on in.
Good to see you, Blake.
You too as well. All right, still to come here on The Hill, live look at the Democratic National Convention. And imagine what this moment must have been like for Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom last night, you know he wants to be the president at some point in time. Did you see what happened? Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, right after the break, joins us here on The Hill. Stay with us.
We're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back.
Democrats up here are dancing. The Republicans are like, what is that? Welcome back to The Hill. That, of course, Lil Jon last night with a little flair at the Democratic National Convention during Georgia's roll call for the vice president. What'd you make of that? It's one of the most trending videos out there right now in any state.
Oh my God.
Does that stuff work?
It does.
Because
think about it. How many times this morning have you heard from the windows to the walls?
Not that many, actually.
All the time.
It's a great moment. It's a really fun way to do one of the most boring processes of the convention, which is the roll call vote. I like it. I bet you Republicans do it, and I won't be surprised if states get competitive with each other.
The Republican show?
Who's going to?
We'll figure it out.
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock.
Ball with the ball.
We don't need to plan it right now.
From Kid Rock to Lil Jon. I think
Stevie Wonder.
One show is about the contemporary world that we live in today.
Yes, Stevie Wonder.
And the other was about the past and the
Okay, we're not as cool as you guys. I will have to say that.
See, there you
I don't
go.
even know who.
I think
I'm definitely cooler than both of them.
cool.
Oh my God.
Well, that's obvious.
Man, college.
Okay.
Let me tell you.
Michael O.
I am.
Okay.
By the way, remember Gavin Newsom? He is a major surrogate for President Biden, rising star, still is within the Democratic Party. But since Kamala Harris took over the ticket, the California governor has been relatively quiet, you could say. Last night, though, he appeared briefly at the DNC to announce the California delegates' votes. Watch.
It's time for us to do the right thing, and that is to elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States of America. We proudly cast our 482 votes for the next president,
Yeah, right?
You know that he wants to be president. You know he was thinking that should have been my moment, maybe. What's it like for Gavin Newsom?
I love it. It's like an episode of The Bachelor where he picks the other girl at the end. And you have to stand there and like laud their love. You're like, I'm so excited for the two of you.
What do you think is going through Gavin Newsom?
He got, Michael was talking about this in the break. He got the raw end of the deal of who's going to run for Senate, who's going to run for governor. Kamala goes for Senate. He went for governor.
Explain that.
Yeah, so he was going to run for governor. She was going to run for Senate. They didn't want to run against each other in a primary. And so he decided he would run for governor. They made the agreement. And he was supposed to be the one who would be president first. And didn't work out that.
Let's be honest, though, he's done a horrible job in California.
I wouldn't say horrible. He's had a tough thing to deal with.
How many companies left California? How many homeless people? What's San Francisco like right now? Would you?
California's got it's the fifth biggest economy in the world.
It's gonna be hard for him whenever he runs to
litigate
on that,
to
litigate the record, right?
And he's isolating more than her, even.
Yeah, he's deeply unlikable.
Why haven't we heard from him much in the last month, I wonder?
Well, he was the attack dog, really, for the Biden campaign in a lot of ways, and he was really good at that. But the minute that they changed tune, it's like, this isn't the attack dog campaign in that way. That's kind of what J.D. Vance does very, very well, too. Gavin's style and the way that he branded himself for the Biden campaign does not mesh with this happy warrior that we're seeing in the kind of Tim Walz role.
He was good taking on DeSantis.
Was that what last night was about? Happy warrior?
It was very happy. Very happy.
I was happy. Were you happy?
I was so happy. I've never been so happy in my life.
Were you happy when he went to French Laundry, when he forced all those other businesses to stay quiet?
By the way,
gets us in the fields?
We talk about Gavin Newsom. You saw Nancy Pelosi there, speaking of happy, as all of this unfolded, standing next to Gavin Newsom.
Happy.
You can only imagine how she felt with all that. Thank you all. Great show.
It's been a fun show.
Yep.
Got our little team over here.
Before we go, by the way, live look at the third night of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, set to take the stage a handful of hours from now. Basically, his introduction to the country. President Bill Clinton, the former president, also expected to speak tonight. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, live from Chicago. Hello, Leland. What's it like there?
Just starting. And, every night they're trying to get done a little bit closer to prime time.